Hello, everybody. Super excited to have you here on a Saturday in April. I had planned for the Rosé season kickoff party to be a warm, sunny day that we all spent at the beach, and now we're coming home to drink rosé. But alas, it is a rainy, cool, gloomy, typical Virginia spring day, and we're going to be drinking rosé regardless, and it's going to be super fabulous and delicious. Very, very excited to have you here. If you are tuned in live, please let me know in the chat room who you are, where you're coming from. If you look up the top right-hand corner and it says sign in, you won't be able to join the chat room. You have to actually be logged in, YouTube, I don't know, to be able to participate in the chat room. The chat room is helpful just because I like to be able to ask questions and get some feedback and get your participation and your comments, questions, and feedback about the wines that we are going to be tasting tonight. So make sure that you're signed in if you do want to be part of that chat room. Otherwise, my phone is right here. You can text me your questions. I'll keep that on. You can email me your questions. I'm not very good at Facebook and Instagram Live, all these things, but eventually I'll have that figured out and you can be able to do that too. So hello, Sam Mom and Sam Pop. I'm glad they're in the chat room because they are also right here across the table. Always super excited to have Sam Mom and Sam Pop on the I don't know, by the table. It's great to connect with family, and to do it over wine is even better. So am I right? Anybody? All right, Tawana, hello. Great to see you from Western Branch. And we've got a new joiner to the group. Welcome, Misty. Super excited to have you. Tawana texted me this afternoon. Very excited to have you. And oh, no, I just read the rest of that message. She's at work, not able to make it. We are missing you, Misty, if you watch this recording at a later date. Hey, Robin, Kira from California. Great to see you. Crystal, hi. Great to see you. Crystal, is this your first class that you've attended? I know you buy wine from me all the time, but I don't know if I've ever had you in a class before. It's really exciting to have you in a class. So very, very excited about tonight's class. Also, this is kind of sadly like the end of my Saturday virtual classes. So starting in May, we're going to do a weird schedule in May because of the events that I have and the times I'm going out of town. It's not going to be a consistent schedule in May, and I'm still trying to figure out when the classes are going to be in May. But starting in June, they'll be every Wednesday night instead of every Saturday night. So it'll start changing here soon because Saturdays, summertime, people are going to want to be out and about and barbecuing, beach time, vacation, and I'm going to be wanting to do the same thing. So, and lots of private events that I'll be doing on the weekends too. So that is why they're switching to Wednesday nights. But don't worry, they are not going away. Even after everything opens up and I start doing restaurant classes again, I will still continue to do virtual classes to make sure that people who can't get babysitters all the time or get home to walk their dog and then get to the restaurant in time can still participate, including people from out of state like you, Kira. And that's not me, that's the other Kira. And make sure that hopefully everyone can participate. And hopefully by the fall time, I will have shipping license across the United States. So fingers crossed that will happen soon. So, all right, you've done blind tastings. Okay, cool. Fabulous. Well, we are super excited to have everyone here. It's going to be a very different type of class than, say, the blind tastings, which were very analytical, than the other classes, which are very like historical, like a region where I talk about like the 1,000 years of history of this region, or even the chemistry classes, like the soil series classes. This is going to be a little bit more of a fun class because rosé was never meant to be taken too seriously. And so we're not going to beat out the romance by taking rosé too seriously in this class, but we are going to get, of course, a little bit nerdy, a little bit serious about this. So, all right. If you have your tasting sheets in front of you, that's the sheet right here. We are going to be tasting them one at a time. If you want to taste all four at once, by all means do that. You don't have to, or I'm going to be talking about them one at a time. I don't think this class is going to be ultimately that much more helpful to taste everything side by side. So we're not going to do that for this class. But if you want to, just for your own educational purposes, then absolutely do that. So we are going to start off with wine number 1, which is an Italian rosé. This is the Luigi Giordano. Giordano. Let me try that again. Luigi Giordano. We'll see. I'll have to work on that. This is the Rosato, which is the Italian name for rosé. So rosé is a French word, just means pink, the color of rose, pink. And the Italian version of this is called Rosato. So I'm really excited to be trying this. This is a Nebbiolo rosé from Piedmont, Italy. And in the meantime, Tommy, would you mind plugging that in to that and getting that light on for me? Thank you. I forgot to put on all my lights before this gets going, and the sun's about to go down and it's gonna get darker in here. So Tawana, I love it. You didn't even do any pre-studying for this class, which is kind of unheard of for Tawana. Normally you've read all of the books and listened to all of the podcasts before I've even done the class. So I'm glad. That means I don't have to try that hard for this class. So James and Danielle here, great to see y'all. With guests that are interested in learning. Well, welcome new tribe members. That's what we call the viniculture guest is tribe members. We're not a club, we're a tribe because we're all inclusive, open to everybody, and not about being pretentious or snobby. So that is the viniculture tribe thing. And by the way, Danielle and other people who have emailed me, yes, the biodynamics class will be posted on the YouTube channel soon. I'm trying to figure out how to get his slideshow, which he's talking about throughout the whole class, up on the recording as well. So while I work out those technological kinks, save that wine, and I will post that video soon. So
okay, well, we always say it for long. Some pop wanted a case of each.
Yes, and yes, my mom is telling me that some pop wanted a case of all of the wines. So you need to taste the wine soon to make sure that you get your order if you want some. That's fine. That's my sales pitch from some mom. So hey Ryan, great to see you. Glad you're joined in. So no Croatian rosé here today, but we've got some fun stuff from around the world. So all right, we're gonna start off with this Italian rosé. Go ahead and pour yourself a big old glass and go ahead and just sip on this. I'm going to give a kind of a brief history of the 2,600 years of history of rosé in less than 2.6 minutes. That's my goal. 2,600 years of history, 2,600 years of history in less than 2.6 minutes. Start your clock now. So here's the deal. The Phoenicians take these grapes. They are taking them on boats. They're a seafaring empire, and are taking these grape plantings and planting them along the Mediterranean coast, up the coast of Italy, Greece, France, Spain, Portugal, modern day countries, obviously, and all over. And they are taking these, planting these grape vine clippings, not seeds, but grapevine clippings. And thus they're able to kind of return to their trade routes, and grapes are ready to be harvested and continuously being made into grapes wherever they are planting these vine clippings. So throughout the Mediterranean, you have these red vines, like red grape varieties, being grown all throughout. Now, only until, it wasn't until the let's say early 1800s, maybe late 1700s, that deep, bold reds started to become more fashionable and more desirable. Up until then, red wine was made in a color just slightly darker than this. So basically, for all of history of red wine history, red wine is being made in more of a rosé style. And that means like very transparent, very pale pigmentation, very, very pale coloring, not the deep, bold, like you can't see through that wine with the strobe light kind of wines that we know of as red wine today. So all of this history, all of these red grapes are being cultivated And we don't have very sophisticated winemaking techniques. We don't understand the science of fermentation for up until the Middle Age, like up until past the Middle Ages. And so these red grapes are being picked and they're being harvested and they're being made into wine, but they are not spending a lot of time in the process of what we call maceration. And that is where the juice is in contact with the skins, the seeds, the stems, and everything of the grape. The pomace is what we call that. All of the stuff of the grape clusters that are not the actual juice. That's called the pomace, the solids, the grape solids mixes with the juice, and that's what actually creates the color of red wine. So if you peel the skins off red wine grapes, it's the same color inside as a white wine grape. There's about 5 distinct varieties that are actually the juice inside. The grape itself inside is red or black all the way through, but only about 5. Very rare to see that. Other than that, if you just squeeze a red wine grape or red grape, you're going to get the same color grape juice as you do if you squeeze a green grape or a white grape. So up until late 1700s, early 1800s, the red wines that we are getting in the world are very pale in concentration, very like softly pigmented red wines. I'm getting these notifications, sorry for the distraction, that my chat is disconnected. I keep having trouble with these chat. If someone could just try to type something in the chat room just right now, just to see if it's connected or not, or if I have to do something to restart this video. I want to do that earlier rather than sooner. I mean, sooner rather than later. You know, the English expression. So in the meantime, let's get back to the history of rosé. So as we start growing in our knowledge of winemaking practices, as we start really figuring out what is happening in the vineyard to make high quality grapes and in the winery and in the cellar to make high quality wine, now we're starting to realize like, oh, all right, we understand how to make more concentrated, fuller bodied, more robust red wines. Up until then, a tannic, darker colored red wine, like what we think of today as red wine, was considered like a flaw in winemaking. They really like valued the clarity of these like lighter, paler, rosé style wines, basically. So then they started figuring out like, well, all right, so we like red wines like robust like this, and now we understand how to make them more, and we understand how to further concentrate their flavors, and so we want to do that. But we also kind of miss this like lighter style of these red grapes, because all of these grapes planted along the Mediterranean coast, we're eating seafood all the time, and we've got very light fare, and we're eating olives and seafood and pasta with olive oil, not butter and mushroom and risottos and stuff like that of the northern cooler regions. So we want something fresher that's a little bit more refreshing and a little bit like lighter, crisper style of wine to pair with these things. And we want to use these red grape vines that we've planted. And so rosé kind of happened unintentionally, just like that's how they were making wines. And then as they start making more concentrated red wines throughout history, they start realizing we want to continue making this lighter style. So that brings me to the ultimate question: what is rosé? Like, is it red wine, just a splash of red wine and white wine? Is it just a blend of white wine and red wine? Like, what is going on? What makes this wine this color? And the question is nuanced because there's a lot of different answers, but the majority of all rosés are made from red grapes. So just like my shirt, I didn't have any pink shirts and I didn't have any rosé wine shirts, but I wore red wine, red grape variety shirts in here. So just like Shiraz, Merlot, Cabernet Sauvignon, Malbec, you take these red grapes and you can make rosé out of them, because remember, the juice of a red grape is the same color inside as a white grape. So the only way a red wine gets its color is from extra maceration, extra skin contact, extra time that the juice spends with the pomace of the skins of those red grapes. So if you harvest all your grapes, You put them in a big vat, and the juice is mixed up with the pumice, the skins and the seeds and everything like that in these big vats. And then you, after a matter of like 6 to maybe up to 24 hours, that's on the higher end, 6 is on the lower end, you're going to press the juice off the skins. And back in the old days, it was like a basket press, and you like literally crank this, like crank down, and it says basket. And so it literally pushes the juice out, but the skins and the pumice stays on the inside. Nowadays, it's more like this huge like salad spinner colander kind of thing. And there's like an airbag inside that like continues to expand and pushes the juice out, but keeps the pumice on the inside. So regardless of the technology, you're pressing the juice away from the skins. You're removing the juice from the skins, the pumice of the actual of the vat of everything you've been processing. And then you're going to ferment that juice. That juice is a pale pink color, otherwise known as rosé. So that's one way. It's called the maceration method. So that's one way. That is the primary way. I'd say, let's call it 7 out of 10. 70% of the rosés are made like this. Fewer portion of the rosés in terms of just number of labels, but maybe a larger portion in terms of quantity are made in a different method. And that is called the Sanye method. That is a French term. It means bleeding. So you're literally taking all of the grapes, just like we did. We're macerating them together. But after 6 to 24 hours, instead of just pressing the juice off the pumice, because we want to save all of that to make high quality red wine, so maybe we'll wait a little bit longer and we'll just bleed off some of the already macerated juice from the wine. So we're going to leave the rest there. So in this huge tank, say it's like 40 hectoliters. We're going to bleed off 10 hectoliters of this juice, and it's going to be pink colored. We're going to leave the remaining 30 hectoliters in this huge vat, and we're going to continue to let that juice macerate on the skins, the pumice of those grapes, to further concentrate it, because we're going to use the rest of that to make more concentrated red wine. So it's almost a way to get the best of both worlds. You make rosé wine, which is light and refreshing, but you also make the red wine from the exact same amount of grapes, but you make that red wine even more concentrated and rich. So a little bit different styles. Sometimes people like it literally is just like a method to maintain cost, and it's like the most economically wise decision to make sure you're doing it the Sanye method. So I'm going to make a rosé, but then I'm going to further concentrate my red wine by doing it this. And so you can do the best of both worlds. That is not to say that everybody who's making a rosé in the Sanye method, this bleed off method, is making cheap or like non-high quality rosé wine. That is not to say that at all. But oftentimes it's just a matter of best bang for the buck. So those two methods together, the maceration method, where you're taking the whole tank, pressing it off the skins within a matter of hours and fermenting that, or the Sanye method, which is you take a small amount of the juice to further concentrate the remaining juice and ferment them both separately as a concentrated red and as a rosé, the Sanye method. That accounts for about 90%, I'd say, of rosé wine. You have another small portion of rosé wine, which is not a blend of red and white wine. It's not like I'm going to pour into the bottle 90% white wine, and then I'm going to top it off with 10% red wine, and I'm going to make pink wine. That happens at parties, you know, when you have a little bit of red wine in your glass and someone tops it off with white wine, and oops, you've got a rosé, and you drink it and it's delicious. But that's not how the wine world works. So instead, if it is a blend of truly white and red grapes, they're usually picking them and fermenting them together, co-fermentation. So they might have, let's say, Vermentino and a Sangiovese blended together, the actual grapes, and then they are macerated and fermented and processed together as one wine. So that would be a blended style. That's not super rare. It is in the champagne method. That's the only real time you see quality wine where it's a white wine, and then they'll top it off with a little bit of red wine to make a pink colored wine. That's really only happening in the world of sparkling wine, specifically Champagne district of France. And that is high quality stuff. That's not anybody cutting corners. That's like how it is done in Champagne in this method. So, but for still rosé, we really don't see that happening in terms of just white wine and we top it off with some red wine. So 90% maceration and Sanye style. We have a little bit of this co-fermentation style. And then we have two different styles, which we're not tasting today, but it's worth mentioning. And then we'll get to actually talking about what we're tasting in France. And that is vin gris and orange wine. So what's up with vin gris? I always see this, like, what does it mean? It's this white wine, but it says that it's made from red grapes, and I'm very confused, or it might have the slightest, palest tinge of like pink to the coloring. And so it's exactly that. It is white wine made from red grapes, because remember, the grape themselves, the only thing that's giving the wine the pigmentation is the skins of the grape. So if you press it in 6 hours, you're going to have a paler color. 24 hours, you're going to have a richer color. If you press it within a matter of 30 minutes to 1 hour, you might have the slightest coloring, but very, very little throughout there. So you can actually make white wine from any red grape. And that is what we call vin gris, or gray wine, if you were to translate that from French. So that's vin gris, white wine, or slightly pigmented wine from red grapes. Then you have orange wine, and orange wine can actually even be this deeply pigmented, this bright of an orange color. And the orange wine is actually made from white grapes. So yes, you can make white wine from red grapes, and you can make orange wine or pink wine from white grapes. Well, how the hell does that happen? And here's how it happens. With extra skin contact. So the color of the wine, remember, is all about skin contact. So if you take these white grapes, and typically white grapes spend 0 time with skin contact, and it's just a matter of pressing the juice off right away, because you don't want those bitter phenolics like oversteeped tea. You don't want that necessarily in your white wine unless you do. And when you do, you do. And so that becomes what we call orange wine. And so white wine, especially Italians, really honed the process of this. And they'll take these white grapes and they will let them macerate on the skins for, 24, 36, 48 hours, up to maybe even like a week or two. And that's going to not just impart coloring, but also pigment to the wine. So you can get orange flavored colored wine, not flavored, orange colored wine from white grapes when you do extended skin contact. So orange wine from white grapes from white wine from red grapes. You can do a co-fermentation of the two, a mix of the two if you're sparkling wine, Sanye bleeding off, maceration, which is what we're going to be drinking today. All 4 styles are maceration style. So I hope that wasn't too much information all at once, but I'd rather get it out of the way so we can just do the kickoff party and drink these fabulous wines together. So I am still not seeing anything else in the chat. Is anybody? Sure, that'd be great. Thank you. So I am going to so I can see everybody's chat here. I don't know what it is. I always am having trouble these days with the chats here. So, all right, let me see other questions here. I see there's a lot. All right. Sorry, now I'm catching up on all of the chats because I haven't seen it beforehand. anti-red wine rhetoric is being triggered by you. It's not anti-red, Vince. I promise you it is not anti-red. It's about the ultra utilization of these red grapes. So you don't want to just use them for this. You want to make sure they're used for everything, that they have the most extended life of all. So it's like the opposite of anti-red wine rhetoric. It is like the worshiping of the red wine rhetoric is what we're going for here. We want to drink white wine, but it needs to be red wine, which is why rosé is a thing. So but great call on this. So color variations of these wines are impressive. Yes, I love this. We're going to be trying 4 very, very different styles of wines here. So Steve Hill at Sunpop, number 1 makes me think I am walking in a tropical garden in Hawaii with a volcano in the distant background, both on the nose and the palate. I need to go on vacation and live this life. Yes, I fully agree. Tawana says, yes, on the sight and the smell and the taste, the color makes me think of hibiscus flowers. So please go ahead and as I get caught up in the chat room, go ahead and put in the chat room what you are smelling and tasting in this wine. I will preface this by saying this is a 2019 vintage rosé, right? Like, what is Kira doing? Why is she selling us old rosé? I thought rosé, you had to drink it within a matter of months. And I'd say for the most part, that is true. Because red wines, when you actually pick them, they usually have a lower total acidity or tartratable acidity. Oh my gosh, what is that word now all of a sudden? Now I'm live on camera and I cannot say that word correctly, but total acidity, it's the same thing, TA. Titratable, yes. All of a sudden I get mixed up there. Titratable acidity, TA, total acidity. It's the actual measurement of all of the acid compounds in the wine or in the grape itself, whichever you measure. And red wines, red grape varieties, when you pick them, are going to have lower amounts of TA, acid levels, than white grape varieties. So your rosés are actually always going to be a little bit less acidic than your red wine, than your white wines, which means that they're a little bit easier to drink on their own, which is fabulous. But because they don't have the tannins of red wine to preserve them for longer, or the acid of white wine to preserve them for longer, or sugars either, because all of these are dry rosés, generally speaking, rosés are going to taste best if you drink them within a year and a half max. There are a few exceptions, and that is only in places that are making high acid or highly tannic or highly phenolic rosé wines. Italy is one of them, especially northern Italy, but any cool climate Italian rosé. So anything from Mount Etna on Sicily, very, very cool climate. Anything in Piedmont, so those 2 types of Italian Rosato, you're going to have German rosés. Oh my word, acid levels are higher in German rosés than most white wines from around the world. So those can be preserved for a lot longer. Also, just the intensity and the quality of the care that go into making French, specifically Provençal style rosés from Provence, France, like we're going to be trying later. So we've got 2 2019 vintages just to show that, yes, you can drink a 1-year-old rosé. It is possible. I don't recommend it for the other 2 places we're going to be drinking it from. Like, that wine is meant to be consumed right away. It's delicious that way. But don't be scared of a 1 to 2 year back vintage on any rosés that are from Italy, Provence, France, or Germany specifically. Outside of that, drink it fresh. That's how it's meant to be consumed. But also anything generally over $30. That wine was probably made to last. So don't be afraid to drink 2019 rosés this summer. All right, other questions here about this wine. Every orange wine I have had has been so sweet. Interesting, Crystal. Normally, orange wine is actually like they ferment that all the way dry, so it can be like extremely bitter. It is a thing in Virginia wineries to make orange wine that's also sweet, and I'm very confused by that. So please tell me, where did you get these orange wines? Where were they from? If it was from Virginia, that totally makes sense. Because yeah, orange wine, if it's white wine, I mean, if it's orange wine made from white grapes, usually is fermented all the way dry and it's very bitter, almost to the point of like being not so enjoyable sometimes. But sometimes winemakers just choose to leave the sugar in there for whatever reason. So, all right. So other questions here. Getting loads of underripe strawberries, peach, and herb notes on the nose with melon, underripe strawberry, and semi-dried herbs on the palate. Fabulous. Vince, you can drink anything that is wet. That is absolutely true. Some things are just more enjoyable than others. I love it. All right. Crystal says Virginia and Spain for those orange wines that are sweet. And that makes sense, especially Spain because they're making those as dessert wines. So higher quality than Virginia's weird orange wines that are sweet. So that does check out. But most orange wine in the world is actually fermented all the way dry. So great call there. All right. So I'm going to actually get into this wine a little bit, and then we're going to pour the next one, which is the Prisma Rosé, which was the favorite of last year. So like of all last year, which was the first year I did any wine retail in terms of like wine delivery, because before that, viniculture, before COVID, viniculture was an events business. This one, like I could not keep it in stock. And even after it was sold out for the entire vintage, every week I got requests for it. So I was really excited to try this new vintage. But overall, are y'all surprised about this Italian Rosato? What I love about Italian rosés or rosatos is how savory and herbaceous they are. And I really enjoy that about this one. I get like loads of sage and tarragon specifically, like herbaceous notes on this wine. Like tangerines and nectarines, all the pitted fruit, but on like the yellow and orange side. Sage and tarragon, a little bit of like this orange blossom thing, like this floral note, but definitely not like sweet floral. It is like I'm just eating the flower, if you can imagine eating it instead of smelling it. That's how I get this wine. So I really enjoy Italian rosatos with seafood. Fresh seafood, whether it's chilled in salads, like chilled orzo pasta salads with shrimp in it. Maybe it's calamari, shrimp cocktail. Chilled seafood dishes is my favorite way to enjoy Italian rosatos. Caprese salads with fine ripened tomatoes when we get there this summer. Good mozzarella cheese, a little bit of that sweetness from the balsamic, that richness from the olive oil, and of course fresh basil. And if you don't grow it, get fresh basil. It makes the world of difference. That is how I want to enjoy Italian rosé. So I think I have only like a case and a half left of this Nebbiolo rosé. So Nebbiolo, highly acidic and highly tannic red grape, which is not very red. It's more of a brownish colored grape, which is why we have this color of this like, you can't get through a viniculture class without spilling some wine. Lisa was in like last class, which I was doing this and I spilled it all over me while I was swirling wine. And so anyways, great. You can't get this color you cannot get super pink colored rosé from Nebbiolo grape, but this is what it turns out to be, this tangerine kind of peachish color. So, all right, let us go on to try the Prisma Rosé and keep up the chat room. I'm just borrowing my dad's computer to get the chat up and running. So keep telling me, and I'll just catch up when I can on the chat room here. All right, I love the label, first of all. Can I see that real quick? So this right here, so Prisma in Casablanca, Chile, where if you go from Mendoza, Argentina, right across the Andes Mountains, which is a straight shot, but will probably take you like million days, and lots of oxygen tanks because that is like the highest part of the Andes Mountain right there. You get into Chile and you're going to run into the Casablanca Valley in Chile. So while it is actually one of the northernmost regions, wine regions in Chile, which means closer to the hemisphere, right? Closer to the equator because we're in the southern hemisphere. While it's the northernmost wine region in Chile, which it would be the warmest, it's actually one of the cooler regions because you have this huge fog influence. So the fog kind of hangs out until about 1 o'clock in the afternoon. And then at nighttime, the temperature drops dramatically. So you only get these like key few hours in the afternoon for it to really warm up and ripen the grape varieties, almost like Russian River Valley in California, which is where Pinot Noir is so famously grown. And so it would not be surprising at all to see that Pinot Noir in this climate grows really well as well. So I just started carrying their red Pinot Noir, and it is delightful. And this is their Rosé. So brand new vintage, 2020 vintage of the Prisma Rosé. Let's taste and see if this is as good as last year's vintage. Man, totally different on the nose, right? The other one was like savory herbs and like the skins of all of the fruit and like the almost like if a seltzer was made of fruit, like that dusting of a slight hint of a fruit flavor kind of thing with that Luigi Giordano, the Italian Rosato. This is like what that dusting was made of, what that fruit flavor was made of. This is just fruit ball in your face. Whew. I also get those herbs too, but instead of being like dried out and kind of a little bit more like, effervescent or ethereal, this is just like, I just picked this herb garden and I've got it all in my hands and I'm just like sticking my face in these like handful of fresh herbs. Wow. This is some intense on the nose. And the color is totally different too. You get that dramatic like peach pink color. So it's still not like real pink. It's not like magenta or anything like that. But it is certainly way more pinkish hued than that Italian Rosato. All right, let's taste. Ooh, she juicy. Yeah. Well, Tawana says, yes, you called it, Tawana. Much more juicy than the last one. Fruit is riper, absolutely, with a lot of the same notes. Yes, just different condition of those things. So love the call of strawberries and watermelon. Way more of those like candied. I'm getting just like watermelon Jolly Rancher as like after I've tasted this wine. That's what's lingering. Like I'm chewing on a watermelon Jolly Rancher. It's been years since I've had one, but now I want one. So citrus with a hint of cookie, vanilla wafers. Interesting. Wafers have come up a lot in tasting notes recently of these live classes. So now I want to do a wafer tasting. I want to go to some stores and buy a bunch of different wafer style cookies and experience that. That's definitely not my like go-to treat. So but now that it's come up so often in tasting notes, I feel like I need to understand that more. So great call on that. I will have to work on that. Steve Hill, Sun Pop says peach. Yes. Because wine number 2 is a screw cap, I enjoyed a glass for pregame tonight. I totally respect that. Yes. When you don't have to Coravin the wines, or you can't Coravin them without the screw cap adapter, it's a nice excuse. Last time I think the Rosé class, all of them were screw caps. And so people who were doing the class solo were just bummed by the end. It was great. So all right, so loving this Nebbiolo Rosé. Don Smith says, great, that's fabulous. Happy belated birthday, Beth. So great to have y'all here tonight. Maybe because they're lighter and not so rich and dominant on those wafers. I gotta try these. They're definitely not like full on candy. There's something else going on there, like sweet tarts, something happening there, but really delightful. I don't think I've ever had a wine from Prisma that didn't way over deliver for the price too. So their Pinot Noir, they make a Sauvignon Blanc, and this Rosé as well. So, all right. So what is everyone's take so far? Before we get into the California versus France, because those are the same grapes, made in a similar-ish style. These were the dramatically different styles, right? The savory style and the tutti frutti style. Both dry, right? There's not residual sugar on these wines, or more than I think like 1 total gram per liter. So dry wines. Do we have a favorite so far before we get into the California and French style rosés, which are both the California is more Grenache heavy, but has that Mourvedre in it, and the French is more Mourvedre heavy, but has a little bit of Grenache in it. So, and by the way, at the very end, take these. You don't have to take serious notes, but if you just want to take any, if you just want to circle your best expression, post a picture of this at the very end of the class. Obviously, after we taste it all for. Post a picture of this note page on either Facebook or Instagram. If you tag vinoculture in it, then someone is going to win a bottle of whatever the best expression was. It could be the Chilean one, the Italian one, the California one, or the French one. Whoever the overall deciding, the decided winner of best expression of rosé for this kickoff party, someone will win a bottle of that. But you've got to post the picture on either Facebook or Instagram and tag me to get the chance to win. So, all right. I love this rosé. To me, they're different styles. I want that. I really want the Italian rosado with food, and I want it with that seafood. This rosé, I want Saturday afternoon after I've mowed the lawn. I have a balcony. I don't have a lawn, but if I did have a lawn, then after I mowed the lawn, I'd want a very chilled glass of this while I sat by the pool and enjoyed some sun. Could also see this like picnic wine, beach wine. This is meant to kind of enhance the enjoyment of life, but not necessarily have to be a food wine. And totally different styles, totally different personalities. Love them both, but for different occasions. Let's see here. Some Pop says both are great, but some Mom and I actually agree this time that we like number 1 the best. They never agree. They always have different opinions. That is surprising that they agree. Oh, fabulous. Joanna, you and I both agree then that number 1 needs food and number 2 is a great porch wine. So awesome. Well, let's get into the California and French styles of rosé. So again, all of these wines are made in this maceration style. And here's why that might matter. Again, not that any wine made in Sanye style. Some of my favorite rosés are actually made in the Sanye style, the bleed-off style. But the maceration style means that they are picking the grapes because they want to make rosé out of the grapes, not because they want to make red out of the grapes, and then to make the best red, they're going to bleed off some of the wine to make rosé also. Even if that rosé is delicious, when you pick grapes, when your intention for that plot is to pick grapes, harvest them, and make them into rosé wine, you're just going to handle them a little bit differently. You might pick them earlier, so they're going to have higher levels of acidity, because acid compounds in grapes. We'll just take a quick detour while you pour this next wine, which is the Skinner Vineyards Eldorado Rosé 2020 vintage. While y'all pour that and get your noses in there, I'll just take a brief chemistry detour and we'll talk a little bit about acid, and not the drug, but the what makes wine fabulous. So of the acid compounds in a grape, 90% of them are made up of tartaric acid and malic acid. Tartaric acid is way stronger, 3 times as strong as malic acid. So malic acid, think Granny Smith apples. Tartaric acid, think like chemical burns, like way stronger, right? So those acid compounds make up about 90% of the acid compounds in an actual grape. As the grape ripens, the tartaric acid levels are going to stay the same. And during fermentation, tartaric acid decreases during the fermentation. Just the compounds chemically change and get converted and do all this chemistry stuff during the fermentation process. As the grape ripens, while that tartaric acid is staying the same, malic acid is actually decreasing while the grapes are still on the vine. And that's because the grape is actually using malic acid as an energy source during the ripening process. So that's why if you pick grapes too early, they're going to be way more tart than if you wait till later. Also, though, sweetness or sugar levels that develop as that malic acid gets converted for energy, sugar levels or glucose is being formed by the actual vine and increasing it. And the higher levels of glucose you have, the less apparent the tartaric acid is. So malic acid is decreasing and the perception of that tartaric acid is decreasing even if the levels are staying the same. So that is why if you pick grapes later, they taste so much sweeter, way less acidic or anything like that, but just 2 weeks earlier might be, abrasively acidic. There's also some other acid compounds, some that happen as a result of conversion in the fermentation process, like lactic acid. That happens during malolactic conversion process where malic acids turn into lactic acids, and citric acids too, which are pretty small in terms of what you actually find in the grape, but often in especially bulk wine products get added during the fermentation process for any grapes that are kind of low acidic levels, and they taste flabby in your mouth. So they need to add acid, and if it's a finished product, the easiest way, the cheapest way, and the most efficient way to do that is just literally adding citric acid to the wine. And yes, that happens all the time, and even your top brands, you would be surprised. So when you're picking red grapes to make rosé, you want to actually pick them while their malic acids are a little bit higher. So you're not waiting for those malic acids to be fully converted. You're picking them while they're a little bit higher. The sugars haven't fully developed either. And so you're getting a brightness and freshness of fruit. You're also getting a little more of those green flavors, right? Green strawberries, raspberries, green things, melon notes, instead of those black fruits, black currants, black cherry notes, raspberry. So as the acids change, the flavors are going to change. And so when you're making a rosé wine, if you're making a bleed off or a Sanye style rosé wine, you're going to get a little bit more of that fruitier style, softer style of rosé, a little bit richer mouthfeel probably, versus the super refreshing, like crisper style rosés, which are made maceration style, which because they're picking those grapes earlier. It's an economic thing too. I mean, if you think about it, in any of these regions that we're tasting from, they could make red wine from these vineyards, right? And they're choosing to make rosé instead. And that is a hard choice because rosé, while it sells like wildfire, thanks to the last 20 years, the millennials have taken hold of social media and made rosé a thing that has like the wine world, it took over the wine world by storm with hashtags and memes and stuff like that all about rosé. Before then, it was like a rich celebrity thing in the Hamptons thing. It was not this like hugely popular, wildly crazy, fanatic kind of worship of rosé. So all of these vineyards, you could make the grapes harvested from those vineyards into red wine, but they're choosing to make it into rosé, and you cannot sell Skinner Grenache for the same price as you can sell the rosé. The red wine is always going to command, or you can't sell the rosé for the same price as you can sell the red. You're always going to be able to command a higher price for the red than you do for the rosé. That's just how the wine world works, because you can't age it as long, right? You can age red wines for a lot longer, so they have a longer shelf life, so they're going to be worth more money. The rosés, you need to drink them faster, so they don't have as much of that shelf life and can't command as much of that same price. So that kind of goes into so if they're making a wine maceration style and they're not doing Sanye Method, they have chosen those vineyards to be their rosé vineyards, and they are choosing to make rosé instead of red. And it's an intention, it's a choice, and they're putting their efforts all into that. So speaking of which, let's taste this rosé, right? Skinner Vineyards, one of the oldest historical wineries. It was kind of like a winery that happened in the 1800s as like the gold rush was moving over to California. And then they didn't strike gold, but they did, just metaphorically instead of physically. So instead of actually finding gold, they decided to, this family decided to actually plant vineyards to make wine to sell to the communities that were building up all around the gold mines. And those are the people in El Dorado, the golden city, golden state, El Dorado, that actually made the most money in the long run was the wine community. So they did strike gold, just metaphorically. So tell me what you are getting. Oh my gosh. Sorry, I just stuck my nose in this for the first time actually. And it is so delightful. All right, let's see what y'all are saying in the chat room here. I like that. Crystal, you're keeping the options open. There are 2 more. Yes, absolutely. And you don't actually have to choose a favorite, right? Because all 4 of these are my favorite. I only ever select my favorites to serve in classes. They're just my favorites for different reasons. And so it is a tricky thing, picking a favorite. It's an impossible thing. So we're not trying to pick our favorite rosé. We're just trying to pick our best expression, or which one spoke to us the loudest, or something like that. So Vince says Jolly Ranchers. And Vince, tell me, since I'm just catching up now, is the Jolly Rancher note on the Skinner Rosé from California or the Prisma Rosé from Chile? Do tell. Tawana says, wow, the watermelon color on this wine is screaming for summer. Yes, it is truly like watermelon juice. White Zinfandel, same thing as rosé. Great question. After I get through the chat room, we'll go into the history of what is up with white Zinfandel. And is that a rosé? Great question. Love that. Just want to know that white Zinfandel is no longer a thing, but I'm curious about the relation. It is still a thing, and I think that there is a place for a resurgence of a true white Zinfandel to be appreciated, and we'll talk about that soon. Steve Hill, Sun Pop says number 3 is a fruit salad of not overripe grapes, cherries, green apples, and watermelon. This might be the first time that I have ever fully and 100% agreed with my dad's tasting notes on a wine. Sometimes he gets a little out there on his wines, purposefully to trip me up and see if I can keep a straight face while reading his tasting notes. But this I totally agree with. The cherries on this are intense. Like a tart cherry pie. Yeah, like if you could do cherry rhubarb instead of strawberry rhubarb, like if that would be a thing. But there is this like creamier texture too, almost like a tangerine creamsicle, or if you put tangerine and white cherry and made it into a creamsicle, like an Italian cream soda. That's what I'm smelling this. Lots of orange fruits, orange citrus fruits as well. And like Special K strawberries. That's what I get, like freeze-dried strawberries on this too. But I get a little bit of this like creamier, chalkier kind of thing going on in this. So I love this. Let's see. That's delicious. Yeah. This to me is what California is so good at in terms of their expression of fruit. But this winery always chooses to reserve, like to make their wines a little bit more reserved, a little bit more food friendly, a little bit more like refreshing style rather than like this over extraction, like powerhouse style. I really, really enjoy the balance of the California fruit with its food freshness on this wine. I have not had a wine from them yet that was not kind of striking in its difference from other California wines. Its unique expression of authentic fruit, like this is actually what the fruit is supposed to taste like, but in this really truly unique way. So their Chenin Blancs, truly amazing. I love their Grenache. Now it's their Rosé. So I guess it's only the third wine I've had from them. They don't make tons of wine, but all of them, this more Rhone varietal styles of wines is what they focus on, has been really, truly delightful. And I think I need to now experience all of the rest of their wines. Maybe we'll do a Meet the Maker class with Skinner, since I keep being so impressed with their wines.
Mm-hmm.
So that's our 2020 Eldorado Rosé from California. While y'all finish up this, and before we get to the epic Vandal Rosé, we'll talk about white Zinfandel. Since we're in California, metaphorically speaking, because we're tasting California wine, we'll talk a little bit about this California Rosé. So Rosé, remember, was a thing because that's how red wines were made. As they start making red wines more extracted, more full-bodied, more tannic, more intense, they start making rosés purposefully as a way to use younger grapes, make sure they're utilizing all of the wines, and give this different style of not anti-rosé rhetoric, but just another expression of these red grape varieties. So until, let's see, what was his name? Oh my gosh, Bob something. Of course it was Bob, of Sutter Home in California. They were, by the way, a bonded winery in the 1800s, right? They're one of the few bonded wineries that were established in the 1800s that still exist today and lasted throughout Prohibition. So Sutter Home, we know of it as like box wine, jug wine, 1.5 liter wine, kind of, $3 stuff. But back in the day, they were like premium winemakers, and Zinfandel, the red Zinfandel, was their grape. So mid 1900s, we're talking like 1950s, 1960s, 1970s, Zinfandel is their thing. So they started making Sanye style white Zinfandel, is what he called it. So bleed off style. So he's making Zinfandel, red Zinfandel, and he wants to further concentrate the flavors. So he's bleeding off some of the juice, which means all of those phenolics, all of those pigments, compounds from the grape skins are going to be further concentrated in a smaller ratio of juice for the red wine. And that pink wine that he's bleeding off that he'll then ferment separately will be what he called white Zinfandel. And it was about this color, just a peach pinkish color. And he fermented it almost all the way dry. He left a little bit of sweetness to it just to preserve some just chuggability to it. But he fermented all the way, almost all the way dry, and he called it white Zinfandel. It wasn't until 1975 when they had a problem with a stuck fermentation. So fermentation 101, to go back to chemistry, the yeast is going to eat the sugars of the grape itself, that juice, and the byproduct is alcohol and carbon dioxide and a couple other things, but alcohol is what we care about, right? So sometimes yeast just gets stuck and it doesn't keep fermenting. It gets lazy. It's just like, I quit, I'm out, I'm done. It could be a temperature thing. It could be so many different factors go into this indigenous yeast. There's very fickle, difficult yeast strains that are just indigenous and native in the air that are being used. Sometimes we'll just get stuck in like, I don't want to ferment anymore. I'm kind of like, peace out. So that is going to leave a lot of that residual sugar left over in the wine because it hadn't fermented all the way dry. The yeast is done. It's not working anymore. This is before they really started using cultured yeast that's literally genetically modified to make sure that fermentation never gets stuck, that it will ferment the wine all the way dry. So they can't do anything. They're like, well, it's done. We're not going to be able to get this to ferment all the way to what we want it to. So we just have a sweet pink wine. So he's like, what the hell? Let's just sell it. And little did he know that would actually catapult them into like the billionaire status of winemakers. So the American palate loved it. The people who wanted a non-pretentious, chuggable pink wine. Loved it. So they still called it white Zinfandel, and it was such a wild success that from then on they started making their white Zinfandel always sweet. So they stopped fermentation, leaving that residual sugar left over in the wine, not allowing that yeast to ferment all the way dry. And the white Zinfandel industry was born, and to this day, I cannot tell you. I mean, I know, Tawana, you said like white Zinfandel is not a thing anymore, but I mean, it is like people sell this by the ton, white Zinfandel. Like, I can't tell you how many restaurants I go to where people ask for a Zinfandel and I bring them out a glass of red wine. They're like, whoa, it's supposed to be pink. I didn't know Zinfandel was red. Like, white Zinfandel was so popular, so crazily popular, cult status, that people thought Zinfandel was a pink grape. They did not know Zinfandel could be made into red wine. So it's just really fascinating to see, how accidents in the wine world often end up being what pivots the industry. India Pale Ale, if you're beer drinkers, IPAs, was kind of just like this thing to help preserve the wine. So the Brits in India didn't have refrigeration. They still wanted to drink beer, but the beer was going bad. And so they put extra hops into the beer, made it very, very, very hoppy and very bitter, because those hops help preserve the beer without refrigeration. And then that became a style that now you can't go to any brewery without having like 25 IPAs shoved down your face. So some of these things in the alcohol industry, whether it's beer, liquor, or spirits, or wine, that were accidents or like just preventative measures, happen to be the most popular thing. And so you just never know what sells, I guess, until you accidentally make it. So that is the history of white Zinfandel. And I don't knock any wine, right? Because I'm not a wine snob. I'll keep saying that. If you're drinking wine, awesome. I love it. And everyone starts on their wine journey somewhere. So someone might start on their wine journey drinking white Zinfandel, and then they move to drinking slightly fruitier rosés but drier, and then they might move to white wines or red wines or go from there. But you're always going to start somewhere on your wine journey. No one starts just like coffee. No one starts loving coffee because they just love bitter concentrated espresso by the shot. Like, you start somewhere and you move in a direction. So great question on the white Zinfandel. It is really interesting history. So Sun Pop says, favorite porch wine so far tonight, especially after a long work week and finishing mowing the dirt. Is that Prisma or the Skinner?
Skinner.
The Skinner.
Skinner. Yeah.
Okay, gotcha. So talking about the Skinner on a 75-degree sunny day. Totally agree. But ordering a case of number 3 for the summer. Porch wine, love it. We can all be neighbors. I love this. Tawana says, I never see it anywhere. I guess referring to white Zinfandel. I have a great story for you about white Zinfandel from 2003. When you have time, I cannot wait to hear this story. First wine I really drank. We're going to have to do this like a side-by-side Zoom interview where you tell me the story, and then I'll post this because now everyone wants to know this story, Tawana. So let's do that. Danielle, yes, that's what it is. It's a cheese Danish smell. It totally is like a raspberry cheese Danish from like the continental breakfast at a Holiday Inn. That is absolutely what this smells like. Thank you so much for calling that out. That is absolutely perfect. All right, so let's move away from California and go to the place that made dry rosé the epic sensation that it is. I wanted to save not the best for last, but I guess the most prestigious for last, for lack of a better word or a better term. This is Chateau, Kennedale, Vandal Rosé. Again, we're back to 2019. This is the current release. I ordered this back in February, and this is what came in. So like 2020 won't be released, I think, until next year. They hold their wines back because it just tastes better. They understand it does. And I gotta say, so the first bottle of wine I opened up for this to write the review when it first came in, the bottle was empty and the review wasn't written. And so I had to open up another bottle. And then that bottle was emptied before the review was ever written. So now this is the third bottle that I finally got the review about. So it's a hard job writing these reviews, but someone's got to do it. Notice the difference in color on this wine. See, I've got all 4 of these, so I'll hold them up. We have the Luigi Giordano, the Italian Rosato. Right here in the middle, we have the Prisma. That's probably like the darkest of them all. Then we have right here the Skinner, which is similar concentration, but more pink color, a little bit less peach color. And then finally, the palest of all actually is the French Rosé, the Vandal Rosé from Chateau, Kennedale. Almost like, yeah, it's just like you didn't wash your glass all the way and you had just like a tiny little bit of red wine left in it, and that is what you're getting. So, all right. While y'all are getting your nose into this wine and this wine into your mouth, I'm going to transport myself to Provence, and I'm going to sit at a bistro cafe, and I've got the music in the background and the breeze, the salty air in my hair, and a hot French guy, across the table, of course. Tuna niçoise coming out, and we're about to just drink this wine before we just go walking down the streets of Marseille. That is where I want to be with this wine.
What are legs?
Great question. So we've got a question here about what are legs in wine. So if we take the glass, and so on the back of your page here, you turn that around, you have just kind of a breakdown of like tasting notes if you want to follow. And it is interesting because all 4 of these wines have very different legs. So take your glass, give it a good swirl. It's easiest to swirl if you hold it on like the bottom of the stem of the glass. You can swirl with just a flick of the wrist. And then you're gonna let the wine settle, and it will settle and form these legs or teardrops or drips that form and fall down the inside of the glass. It's easiest to see that if you look at the part of the glass that's further away from you. And what you're looking for is how slow they are to form and fall, and how thick they are when they do fall, how defined they are. So if they fall down very quickly, they're very fast, and it's kind of hard to see, then that's very quick to form, fast to fall legs. Very thick, very slow legs would be the opposite side of the spectrum. You're not looking for length because that's just how aggressively you swirl. This is when last class I poured the wine all over myself because I was like, how aggressively you swirl. And then I swirled it very aggressively and the whole glass went out. So if I swirl like this, my legs are going to be this long. If I swirl like this, the legs are going to be this long. So it's not the length, it's the definition and the quickness they are to form and fall. That just tells us alcohol percentage and or sweetness of the wine. So if the wine is higher in alcohol content, those legs are going to be super thick, super slow to form and fall. If the wine does have any sweetness in it, it will also increase the viscosity of the wine, so it will be slower to form those legs and have those legs be thicker. So, all right, see if I can do this. Let's swirl all the wine, and then I'm going to analyze these. Oh, that was dangerous. All right, we have the same glass of all of these too. That's important too because if you have the different glasses, then the legs are going to be very different no matter what. I am getting the slowest to form and thickest legs on the Chilean Rosé, the Prisma Rose. So, which would make sense because that probably has a slight bit of sweetness to it. The Luigi Giordano is about 13% alcohol, so the label says. The Prisma is 13.5, so a little bit higher, which would make sense. The Skinner is 12.5, so a little bit lower. And let's see about this Vandal. Let's see if my Vandal, baby, 14.2%. So higher alcohol content, but probably has the least amount of residual sugar. So Really, really interesting there. Great question on that. And it's fun to be able to do that all side by side. So Provence, right on the Mediterranean coast here. So if you take the Rhone Valley south, you have the northern Rhone Valley, Syrah is the primary grape. Then you get into the southern Rhone Valley where Grenache is the primary grape, but is usually blended with Syrah, Mourvedre, Cinsault, Carignan, a bunch of other things. Then you take that down, and before you hit the Mediterranean, you've hit Provence. So a lot of the same grape varieties that are in southern Rhone, but more of that Mediterranean climate. You have a lot of sun in southern Rhone, and it's pretty warm, but you have these very, very cool winds, like intense winds that allow the grape to make sure it doesn't ever rot at all. Like there's no rot because the winds are going to evaporate any of those things and blow it off. So you get some pretty intense reds there. You're a little bit more protected by those Les Mistral winds in Vandal specifically. And Mourvedre is the primary grape variety here in Vandal. So Mediterranean climate, hotter, not as much of those Les Mistral cold winds coming down. More of that sea salt air too. So a lot of times the rosés from Vandal can have a little bit of brininess to the finish because of the sea salt in the air. And in red wine, you have to have a majority of the grape has to be Mourvedre. So Grenache, primary grape in southern Rhone. Mourvedre is how that grape is pronounced, like moo, like a cow says, vedre, and then you like swallow the D-R-U-H, Mourvedre, or just Mourvedre. You can even say that it just depends on where you're going in France. It's pronounced differently, and I'm not going to knock any pronunciation, so we're going to try. So in rosé, it has to be at least 50% Mourvedre to be called a Vandal rosé. While they are known for their premium red wines, their rosés make up about a third of what they do here, and all of your like most premium rosés from Provence are going to come from here. I'm talking like the premium stuff that's going to cost like $75 to $150 a bottle is coming from Vandal. So much more limited. They are growing these grapes to make rosé. That is their purpose. They want to convert the world into Vandal rosé drinkers, and is definitely like known to make the highest quality rosés from around the world. So whether or not this is your favorite style, that's subjective, but that is the reputation. So, and this is what, there's a specific domain called Domain OTT, O-T-T, that is making, I guess, some of the most like sought after Vandal rosés. And that's what in the Hamptons, all these celebrities and movie stars in the Hamptons start drinking like Domain OTT, you know, on their Hamptons parties in the summertime, pretending that they're in Marseille, France. And that is kind of what started the rosé craze here in the States. And then social media took hold of that, and then rosé became approachable to the everyday wine drinker. So, but Vandal rosé put dry rosé on the map in terms of a high quality wine to be sought after, not just guzzled, and not just when you don't want to drink a full-bodied red wine. So, yeah. All right. Tawana says, is legs or tears more correct? I say both ways. Absolutely both ways. That is totally preferential. I've heard Master Soms say legs. I've heard Master Soms say tears. I say legs just because it's easier to remember. Everyone loves talking about legs. So number 4, Tawana says, much more orangey on the nose than the other 3. Yeah. What I think is the most distinct, before we go through everything else, the most like distinct quality of this wine that sets it apart from the other wines is its integration. So it's got a lot of these flavors, but it's not as obvious, right? Like the first one was like herbs, the second one was Jolly Ranchers, the third one was like this creamsicle thing. This one was like there's so much going on, but like all I'm hearing is the harmonies. It's harder to pick out the individual voices, which I love that about a wine. It like speaks of its balance and complexity. So, yes, my dad, I'm sure, is very amazed that I pulled that off without spilling anything. he's known me all of my life, and I'm quite the klutz. So yes, I was actually impressed by myself too, I gotta say. All right, haven't tasted it yet, but totally agree. Tawana says, does it count as orange juice for breakfast tomorrow? I like this. It is juice, just grape juice, and it is the color orange. I fully support this decision. All right, thanks, Tawana. I want to be you when I grow up. So, all right, taste this wine. Tell me what you think. Is it worth, like, truly double the price of all of the wines we had so far before? Like, do you think it's worth? Quality is more of an objective thing, right? There's higher quality wine, and that's very objective in terms of just like the quality of the fruit, the quality of the winemaking, and what went into it. But perceived quality is very subjective, right? Like, is it worth that much? Yes, it overall is, but would you pay that much for it? Is a totally different question. The very end, after having all 4 of these rosés, do you perceive that this wine is higher quality, or would you just as rather have 2 bottles of the California rosé versus 1 bottle of the Vandal rosé? Very curious to hear. You don't have to choose. You can have 2 bottles of the California and 1 bottle of the Vandal, or you can have 2 bottles of the Vandal. I got it all. But do you perceive that this wine is actually that higher quality, or is everything a little bit more neutral to you? Now I'm going to drink this. Yeah. To me, all of these wines are delicious. All of these wines have their time and place. Like, I would not enjoy this. This wine would be wasted on me if I came home from a long day of deliveries and I just like poured a glass and I like knocked it back, and in 3 seconds the whole glass is gone. The wine would be wasted on me. The Prisma Rosé is what I want for that occasion. This wine, though, if I wanted to like watch the sunset and like savor how beautiful life is and just like sit in silence for 30 minutes while I sipped on a glass of wine and contemplated how lucky I am, like that's what this wine is really amazing for. But this wine, if I had a bunch of people over and we're all cooking and stuff like that, this wine would be lost because we're all concentrated on everything else. That would be when I want this Luigi Giordano. When let's do Mediterranean pizza, and let's do some shrimp on the grill and all of this stuff, and just chill out. And then if I want like brunch wine, the Skinner Rosé is it. Like this is I want it with shrimp and grits, pretty spicy too, because the fruit can take it, and this is like day drinking wine. So I think all of them are really beautiful wines. All of them are so different. I'm so glad we got to try all 4 of these side by side to show that not all pink wines were created equal. But now I'm mostly curious to see what you thought about the wines, because I got to taste these in advance to pick them out. Although, if you all got my email beforehand, the lineup changed so much because the wines I ordered back in February were supposed to be here, and then they weren't, and they were, some were, and then they couldn't get done. They were in Maryland, they were stuck, and this one didn't come in, this one's delayed. So thank you all for being patient as I swapped the order of these wines and the listing of these wines so much. All right. Steve Hill Sunpop says, yes, I would pay double for a bottle, but I would definitely likely drink twice as much of the Skinner over time. Yes, that is totally an accurate statement. I agree. This would be a wine to share with someone who appreciates good wine. Yes, this is not the wine you just pour in everyone's glass. They're going to guzzle it back and not remember it. So Tawana says, when I think of rosé wines, I think of cheaper porch wines. However, the more rosés I drink, I am learning that they're just as complex as other wines. Absolutely agree. They don't always end up being just as complex, but they definitely can be, for sure. Eric agrees. We may forego our mimosa and have number 4 with breakfast tomorrow. Oh, fabulous. I love it. I'm sorry he came home late, but I'm glad he's home, and that sounds like a really amazing breakfast. So overall, winner. Who won the best expression? of rosé in your book if you if you could only pick one of these rosés to drink for the rest of the summer, could you pick one, and what would it be? All things otherwise being equal. I don't know. Sama, what do you think?
Skinner.
Some mom says the Skinner. The Skinner Grenache New Better Rosé from El Dorado.
Really disappointed in the Prisma.
Really?
Yes, because I loved that last year, and it was just so it was just over the top.
Okay. Great call on this. Some mom says that she was really disappointed in the Prisma because she loved it last year, but it felt so over the top fruity this time around. Mm-hmm. So let's do this. The lineup is everything, right? So the progression in which you taste wines totally affects your perception of the wines. So the Prisma was the complete opposite to that Italian rosé, right? Go back, and if you have any left, and you don't have to do this right now, but you can do this later tonight if you have any left, or if you just want to experiment, I'm curious, try it in reverse progression. Try some of that Prisma, and then try that Luigi Giordano. And then if you do it in the reverse order, the Luigi Giordano seems like obscenely bitter because it's so savory in comparison to the fruity notes of the Prisma. So that's why I had to do it in that order. But if you go back to the Prisma, even now after the Vandal, where it's not as stark of a difference, stark of a contrast of flavors, where you still have those fruits, or maybe the Prisma right after the Skinner would be, hopefully will show that like the Prisma isn't as in your face as it appeared to be if you tasted it right after the Luigi Giordano in that contrast. So whenever you are tempted to think that when you taste a wine, especially when you're doing progressive tastings like tonight, that you have this very stark impression of the wine, just make sure that you are okay with like revisiting the wine to like verify that. Switch up the progression, eat some cheese, eat a cracker, eat a bowl of ice cream, I don't care. Go back to the wine in a different progression and see if that changes things, because it oftentimes does. I notice that whenever I do progressive tastings that my perception changes so much as a result of everything. So Don Smith says, winner is the Skinner. I love it. I love it. All right, that's going to be the hashtag of this class. Winner is the Skinner. Very versatile, can be served to a wide range of wine drinkers. I totally agree. Like red wine drinkers can appreciate that. If you like a sweeter style, it has enough fruit. If you like that drier style, it's still dry. Like fuller bodied, lighter bodied, it's kind of got that. And that to me is the mark of Grenache and what Grenache does, whether it's Grenache Blanc, Grenache Rouge, like red Grenache, or Rosé Grenache. Grenache is that grape that appeals to everyone. It is that centrist. Like hardly anyone will hate a Grenache, whether you make it into a white, a red, or a rosé. So I love that you called that. I love it. Crystal says, subjective, yes. In the pool with no food, just chilling, or with brunch board would be different. Okay, so now you have to give me two answers. In the pool, no food, what's your choice, Crystal? And just chilling with a brunch board, what's your choice? You can give me two. If you're going to give me that specific of a scenario, I allow that. Tawana says, when considering bang for the buck, second place would be number 4. And then the first place, number 3, Skinner. All right, Skinner has taken over. Some Pop says number 4. Some Pop has expensive taste. So man. All right, just went back to the Prisma. I mean, the Prisma, for buying it by the case and have the wine that has the screw cap that you just like stick a straw right in the bottle all summer long. Yes, that to me is the winner for the value. Everything is situational, right? But that Vandal, I've had a lot of Vandals that I'm like, oh man, I mean, it's not worth twice the price. Like, I don't think it's really that much better, but this Vandal to me over delivered for even what the price actually is to me. So I was wildly impressed. The Skinner, this is the first time I've had the Skinner Rosé. Always impressed by what they do. And you know I love a good Italian Rosado. So, all right, Tawana, with that champagne taste, I wish we were neighbors. I am behind on messages. Lisa says I like the Skinner, but it's also the one I ordered and tasted, so I'm not sure your vote counts. But I think it does, Lisa, because it's the one we're all drinking, and it's been the winner of everybody so far. So all votes count. I like that. All right. Well, this has been such a fun evening to kick off rosé season. I'm hoping the weather warms up so that more of these rosés around. Starting in May, as soon as I can get the rest of my rosés in, I'll be doing case rosé deals where you can get 12 unique rosés for a special deal. And I'll probably do multiple different rosé classes. Throughout the summer, we'll try different styles. We'll try sparkling rosés, spritzy rosés. We'll try Sanye rosés. We'll try a co-fermented rosé. We'll try a bunch of different styles, and I'll keep this up. The YouTube classes, again, remember, this is probably going to be the last Saturday YouTube virtual class for a while. I might do one in May. I'm still trying to nail that down. I'm waiting for some private event information to get confirmed. But if you want to go ahead and mark your calendars for Wednesday nights, or you can always tune in the recording and watch this at your own time. So thank you so much for tuning in. I really look forward to seeing you all in the future, and hopefully in the future, drinking some rosé with you in real life. But until then, drink lots of wine and have a good time. Cheers, y'all. Happy rosé season.